This is on, yeah. We no longer have a timer. We figured it out. All right, take two. So what were we talking about? Police, the injustices of the justice system, the Memphis case, right?
Yeah.
And did you want to elaborate on anything that you were saying, Gerard?
I think I got it all. My buzz is starting to wear off a little, so.
Okay. All right. So I agree with you, Gerard, in terms of, I think, look, the system as it is, I mean, this is my perspective on it. Just as a general matter, you know, I think police have a ridiculously hard job. And they're often faced with situations that are very difficult, and putting anybody in that type of situation is going to, you know, elicit all sorts of responses. And so, you know, I think in the United States, we have what, 700,000 police. And, you know, we have, you know, the incidents like this, I mean, although they're completely horrendous and completely unjustified and not okay, and evil in some cases, they really are pretty rare, right? Relative to the number of interactions that police have with people.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't have the data in front of me, but that is, I think, a pretty good assumption. And again, I work with police a lot. I've never seen anything remotely like this, like not remotely. Nothing, I've never even seen like and people I work with have, but I haven't, police escalate a situation unnecessarily or things like that. I mean, some of them are rough around the edges for sure. But I mean, it isn't something that regularly happens in my, you know, job. So I think that being said, I think, you know, looking at it from a more systemic perspective, the justice system as a whole, is a good way to sort of look at it. And that sort of is a good segue into the other topic I wanted to talk about, which is this racism, right? So I think you said before, Gerard, that, you know, across the political spectrum, there's been pretty much agreement on whether or not this was bad, right? It's just sort of like self-evidently awful, right? There's no getting around that. However, there is some sort of controversy bubbling, you know, on the left a little bit, and so you got that with the typical people, the AOCs of the world, the Cori Bushes of the world, and basically what they're saying is that this is a further example of systemic racism and white supremacy. So these are the words, the terms that are being used. And I think that, you know, to me, that is not just problematic, because I feel like it's misdiagnosing the problem. You know, I think it's exploitative on their end. They're taking advantage of the political situation, and I don't think it's true. And I don't just not think it's true because the officers, you know, were African American. I don't think it's true because there's just no evidence it's racially motivated at all. That's number one. And I understand that the argument from them would be, you know, the system is set up like this. But I don't really buy that either. I just feel like policing is policing, right? And no matter where you go in the world, there's people, there's police take advantage, whether it's a you know, demographic society like Japan, where you don't have a lot of diversity, you still have abuse of power. Abuse of power is inherent in these types of situations. Now, limiting that and finding different policies and strategies to sort of try and to reduce that as much as possible, but you're not going to eliminate it. And so I feel like there needs to be a way of sort of managing, because obviously racism does exist. Obviously, disproportionately, it affects African American populations in this country, and that happens through the justice system and through policing. But it's much more complex than it's just everything's racist. There's I think there is at the core of the issue is poverty, right? And poverty, generational poverty, disproportional poverty with African Americans is the result of, in my opinion, historical systemic racism, intentional racist policies that were put in place that started a sort of, generations of poverty with a particular race of people. And I think what we're seeing now are the residual effects of that. That's not to say that there isn't still lots of racism that exists, but it's to say that that's the sort of the origin of it. And I think that's a fair analysis, but I don't buy into that everything that happens now is a result of that system, right? Or a result of that sort of that racism, right? Because it oversimplifies the problem, and by oversimplifying the problem, you're missing what the issue is, right? And when you do that, you don't find solutions. And it infuriates me because it's like it's a baseless accusation. So it's not like we need evidence there. It's not like the 5 officers had some sort of there's some history there where they were caught doing things or engaging in some sort of self-hatred or whatever the psychological rationale is for it, right? It's just sort of like, well, this is another thing that happened because it happened to a Black person. It must be racist. Now this is the sort of the focus of the issue, and I think it's wrong, and I think it's immoral. And that might be harsh for some people. I don't know, but that's sort of where I stand.
Well, I'll just say the best thing about free speech is that it helps us to identify idiots unerringly and quickly. And if you are glomming on this, if your immediate response to this is to blame it on racism and white supremacy, I know immediately I can discount everything else you say. So I thank you for saving me a lot of time. If you are among those that believe something like that, it's just so ridiculous on the surface that it doesn't really bear discussion as far as I'm concerned, because if you believe that, then it's obvious that the demand for racism is far outpacing the supply here. If you have to reach this goddamn far to find racism, to create it out of thin air, then I'm sorry, we're not producing enough racism to meet your insatiable appetite, but that's the way it's going to be. Nick, you said that one of the arguments of those that are fingering racism as a part of this is that the system is set up like this. Well, then it is a failed system, because this is very, 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 very much the exception and not the norm. It does not do anybody any good to work from the baseline assumption that there are 750,000 armed stormtroopers walking our streets just looking for any excuse to murder a brown person. That's not reality. That's not close to reality. And pretending that it is and offering solutions based on the assumption that it is going to result in bad policy. It is going to result in bad everything. And I think you're doing everybody a disservice if you look at something like this, where 5 Black cops beat to death a young Black man, and see racism. I think you are beclowning yourself, and I think you are flat damned insulting to those who are victims of racism. I think you are cheapening everything just for putrid political points. But again, the good thing is, if you say that, I know to instantly disregard every damn thing you say. Thank you for saving me all the brain power. I need all I can get.
So for the sake of conversation.
Well, So let me just stipulate, I think that you understand their argument, right? Gerard, I mean, I think.
Yeah, so exact. So what I was going to say is it's really hard to take a look at a situation like this and just, have the first thing that you scream out of your mouth is this is racism. Very hard to do. But and I also say that this is another situation where we've got people, and this is on the far left, they do this, they use these very heavy terms, very broad terms, and it just polarizes the conversation, it dumbs down the conversation, and it's hard to have an honest conversation about it that way. Now, in the bigger picture, well, I really do agree that a lot of it is the socioeconomic status. I also think that we can't completely discount race in the bigger picture of all of this. So you kind of touched on it, kind of the systemic, redlining in cities, puts more people of color into lower income brackets, and the cycle of poverty could make it very difficult to escape that. I think, I think we can all agree with that. I guess I just read a thing, and it was a guy, he mentioned as an attorney that he started out as a DA. He, as going through law school and everything, he wanted to be a guy who went in there and fought the bad guys. And then he became a DA, and it just turned into putting young Black men into prison. And there is a problem with the system right now where greatly disproportionately, it's Black men who go into the system. So let's take a step back on that to kind of make it pertain to the situation. Disproportionately, you are going to get pulled over by a traffic cop of any race if you're Black. Now, does that mean that the police in general are a great big racist institution? No. I think we could all concede that. But it does point to something in society that is still not right when it comes to race, and how it can then affect situations like this. How, an innocent Black person, or the difference in the way somebody who's Black on average gets treated in a situation like this than somebody who is white. We can't throw that out. It doesn't need to turn into, I'm going to make my racism point right now, because I think it also goes into the way that we approach crime, and we are much more focused on punishment than on prevention. And we probably have a lot of laws that should come off of books, but we don't do that a lot. We write more and more laws and make more things illegal. So I think there's a lot to go in there. And I don't think you can look at this situation and just bang the gavel and say, this is because of racism. But I also don't think we can completely discount systemic racism in the bigger picture in how these things can happen.
One of the many reasons I support the decriminalization of marijuana, for more than just the obvious reasons, is that I can only imagine over the years how many confrontations between police officers and young men, predominantly African-American men, has the specter of marijuana criminalization been a driving force in that interaction. If you didn't have to worry about getting busted for having a nickel bag in your car, do you behave a little bit better, or is the cop as inquisitive as they might have been otherwise? So another thing I've had told to me over the years, if you're a veteran police officer and who's been walking the beat for 20, 30 years or whatever, and your experience has told you that that encounters with young African-American males are 3 times more likely to end in some type of confrontation than other races, then naturally, whether you realize it or not, your brain is going to kick into survival mode. Much like if you touch a hot stove, you're going to be wary the next time you touch a stove. How do you combat that? I don't know. So much of what we call systemic racism is simply in the hearts and souls of men. That is bloody difficult to attack. That is bloody difficult to address. How do you get inside somebody's head and drill into them that, hey, statistically speaking, this young African-American you're pulling over is about as likely as a Hispanic or a white guy to cause you problems. If your experience tells you differently, how do you overcome that? You don't do it with legislation, certainly, but that's a heart and mind issue that's hard to address, and I don't know the answer to that. I do believe, though, that those that are immediately are jumping to systemic white supremacy, racism, whatever the term du jour is, I think they're doing a disservice. I think they're doing a bloody disservice to those who are still victims of the lingering residual racism that we still have here. I think they cheapen that by looking at something like this and claiming it's white supremacy. I think they're just cheapening everything. But again, it is good in that if somebody makes that claim, I know not to pay any attention to them.
I just want to chime in real quick and say I'm okay with holding police officers to a high standard that I am.
Yeah, if we as a public are going to arm somebody, give them arrest power, give them, when necessary, a license to kill, you damn right there's a high degree of accountability that comes with that. And if you don't like that, there's a billion other jobs out there for you.
So I think we can all agree that poverty breeds crime, drug use, all types of bad things, right? So if you have a specific demographic, whether it's African American, Hispanic, or white, in a society that's disproportionately poor, then that demographic is going to likely, almost certainly, be disproportionately committing crimes more, disproportionately using drugs more, disproportionately doing all of these things, right? So if that's true, and we looked at the statistics, I think it's pretty, I've seen the statistics. In terms of violent crime and arrests, African Americans have a disproportionately far higher rate than any other demographic. And I'm sure that's even higher if you sort of reduce it down to geographic regions, right? And so if you're a police officer that works in these particular areas, right, where the crime rate is really high, the violent crime rate is really high, like in Chicago, Detroit, a lot of the cities down south, I'm sure Memphis is one of those, right? Your reaction to that, right? And I think, Chuck, you touched on it, right? To if you're exposed to that kind of stuff on a regular basis, right? So is going to be, unfortunately, more reactive, right? Or more, you're going to prepare yourself, right? Because you're afraid, or you don't want to get hurt. So I think that we got to sort of put these in perspective. And I guess what I'm getting at is when this is put on police, just sort of as a general concept, I just think it's unfair because the system is set up that way for various reasons, because of flaws in it, and we need to obviously try to figure it out. But I just think that we have to, be a little bit more understanding and just understand that it's not as simple as it's not like people are starting their day going, I'm going to get, whatever, right? And so I just think that just kind of having some perspective and understanding that this is a very, very complex issue, and that when you reduce everything to race, and when you reduce everything to systemic racism, and when you're constantly crying white supremacy and all of this stuff, and especially when you're a public official, right? If that's your go-to, if that's your default, all you're gonna do is inflame racial hostility, right? You're not really helping, in my opinion, because you're misdiagnosing the problem.
Well, you're reducing the problem to
right.
one thing that's not helping anybody. I will put this out there too, Nick, and I'll get what you guys want to say on this. I wonder, as we learn more about this particular incident, I'm wondering how much experience these 5 cops had. I have not read anything on how long they had been on the force. It would be interesting if most of these were new hires and maybe had not gone through as much training as others. I don't know, because
I don't think that's true, because they were on a special squad called the Scorpion something. So
I missed this. Okay,
so
Scorpions? What the hell is that?
I don't know, but I think it had to do, I read something briefly on it, so this is probably very wrong or somewhat wrong, but I think it had to do with the increased crime rate going on, and they were a part of some special squad to help sort of eradicate or decrease crimes,
Well,
particularly in the city.
they did a crackerjack job there, didn't they?
Yeah, they eliminated the whole squad after this.
Yeah. Well, to me, they broke every rule of policing that I'm familiar with. I'm not a cop, but gosh knows, through osmosis, I've learned what makes a decent cop, and one of the is de-escalation. When there is tension, the best thing to do is to do everything in your power to diffuse it. When it comes to a physical confrontation, your goal is to subdue the subject, to cuff them, to get them to a point where they are not a physical threat to you or anyone else. There was zero effort by any of these cops.
That wasn't their intention.
Yeah,
It
you
just,
got 5 full-grown cops around a 150-pound guy. If you cannot bring him in without killing him, then you wanted to mess him up. Now, I don't say they wanted to kill him, but there's that chance if you beat the snot out of somebody that they're going to die. I mean, that's.
have you guys heard of the run tax?
Oh yeah, where if you make a police officer run, they're going to give you a couple of extra shots there when they get, yeah.
So I think what happens, and I am definitely not making any excuses for anybody or justifying this, but I think this is sort of what happens. I'm just objectively saying. I think what happens is that a lot of police departments sort of they normalize these type of practices.
Yeah.
Under cover sort of, and they and then it just gets out of control, and that's the problem with them.
My brother worked, well, I just, as an anecdote here, and this is by no means representative, but he worked at a maximum security prison, and every so often you would have a couple of the inmates. I mean, they're already serving 50 life sentences. What are they got to worry about? They would throw feces at the guards when they came in to do checks or whatever, and it would charge at them and wrestle them. If someone threw shit on you, Ken said the thing you do is you got them down, subdued them, and if you wanted to get your frustrations out on them, you would pinch their calves.
Yeah,
it leaves a mark. You get your aggression out because you are hot. This guy just threw shit on you. You just pinch the calf. And I'm not saying that's a right thing to do either, but yeah, and I do understand the emotion that, I mean, I shot 2 people that, went into my home one time. I mean, that's, I understand the emotion, but man, if you're a police officer, your entire goal is to de-escalate the situation because there are other people around, even though they weren't in the vicinity here. You're in public. Your idea is to take this threat, this guy who's being physical with you. I mean, he wasn't being very physical, but okay, let's give him the argument that he was resisting arrest. Your goal is not to knock him into unconsciousness. Your goal is to subdue him and to bring him in. And I saw no effort from any of these officers to do that. And I have to wonder how well they were trained. Are they veteran police officers? I can't imagine a cop who's been doing this 20, 30 years behaving that unprofessionally.
So I want to kind of go back to something you said earlier, Nick, where you were kind of making the comparisons to the economic status and the racial population, the economic status as it compares to where people end up in the justice system. I think that there's a lot of truth to that, but I also do think, I mean, the statistics have been put out there a lot of times. If you're Black or Hispanic, you're 3 times more likely just to get pulled over for whatever traffic violation reason is. And I think that exists in a lot of ways outside of socioeconomic status. When New York City had that stop and frisk program running on, again, I don't know if you've ever been in Manhattan, you probably have, Nick. I'm not sure if you've been there.
You're right. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you're absolutely right. In New York, the study of that stop and frisk showed that even for middle and upper class Blacks, they got stopped and frisked more often than lower class whites. So yeah, that's spot on right there.
And I know, like, you know, a lot of it was happening in Manhattan. If you've ever been in Manhattan, super touristy,
Yeah.
a lot of crowds everywhere. There's just a ton of people, cops on every corner, which they've done, and it made it a safer place. There was a time when you go to Manhattan, you go to Times Square, it was just all bad characters.
Yeah, yeah.
And now, you know, we bring my kids there. When they were little, they loved it. But yeah, so that is something that does happen. Damn, I lost my track because Chuck, you mentioned on something that I wanted to try to.
Part of my master plan. It worked.
Right, that's right. And it wasn't really disagreeing with what you were saying there, but you know, again, I think we can hold the individual policeman to a higher standard than we do civilians. And I think, you know, my personal run-ins with police as a white guy and now a white middle-aged guy have been, for the most part, pretty positive. Professional interactions, you know, when I've been speeding or something like that, you got me. I'm not an asshole. Some of them are a little preachier than others, but never felt like I was in danger or anything. And I don't think every population necessarily feels that way when they get pulled over in situations where I didn't do something wrong. It's been, you know, professional interactions, good interactions, things like that. But then I see things where, like the thin blue line, where the thought that the police that are out there, just put it, you know, policemen are the thin blue line between just outright chaos, anarchy, and warfare and the peaceful environment that we live in. Now, do I think that it would be more crime ridden if there weren't police out there? Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, that, you know, that's been proven already. But do I think that it's to these extreme levels that it kind of gets played out to be? I don't think it is. And I think it's kind of like I was a Marine. When I was in the Marine Corps, you know, it's kind of a small population. We all think we're badasses. And when things would happen, we would be telling ourselves, it's people don't understand. That's just the way it is for us. We're Marines, and that's just the way we are and the way we do things, and the way we see the world. And I think there is that in the police force as well. Rarely was I interacting with people outside of, overall outside of other members of the U.S. military. In the United States, of course, I wasn't, and even overseas, it's like those interactions were pretty rare for me, especially compared to the overwhelming amount of time. Now, with police in America, it's different. They are out there interacting with citizens all day, every day. And I will give them, they see the worst of the worst. You know, they see bad things. You know, they see what happens when that drunk driver hits a family of four's car and kills them all, and they've got to go there and see the dead bodies and the dead kids. I get that. I totally get that. But they still have to be held to the higher standard in how they interact with people, with how they interact with citizens that are out there. So I think, of course, they're not dragging people out of the car and beating the shit out of them until they die all day, every day. Oh,
no, that's, yeah, the extreme is wrong too. One thing I always like to say, I've for years, I gave the benefit of the doubt to police officers, simply because, again, I've got a certain amount of respect for somebody who does a job that I could not do. Teachers, same way. I've got a certain amount of respect for school teachers. I do not have the patience to do that. And I envy them, their patience. But police officers, again, they routinely deal with people who are in many cases having the worst fucking day of their lives. That's their norm, is to be with people who are having their worst day. And they are often at their worst. Be they the criminal, the victim, or the family of one of the two, whatever. They're dealing with people, high emotions, who are having either the worst or one of the worst days of their damn lives. So yes, that is a very, very, very much a mitigating circumstance, and why I used to give the benefit of the doubt to police officers. But I'll be frank with you two guys. Watching the behavior of police during the pandemic has really changed my approach. I saw far too many that became militant for no reason, who became, in my opinion, nothing more than glorified enforcers for local government tyrants. And the pandemic really, really colored my view of the policing industry as it is. I mean, I'm not anti-cop, ACAB, or whatever now, and nowhere near that. But boy, it really sobered me up as to the potential mischief that this industry could cause if it lost its way. And I don't think it's lost its way, but it's possible. The pandemic really, really impacted me in that respect. I guess I'm happy that I can change my mind after age 50, which I was over 50 when the pandemic began. But yeah, that really colored my view. And of course, situations like this in Memphis don't do it wonders either. But again, I do always remember that police officers are often dealing with people who are having the worst day of their lives, and they do that every day.
Yeah,
So
I've never been having a great day and things are going great. And then
Here
I'm
come the
looking around going,
cops.
where's the cops? I'm having, things are so great right now. We need some police here so I can share this great
We
day
need
with
police
them.
officers and sirens around here. Then the party's really going.
So,
But yeah, so I understand in that respect.
yeah, so I just think, I think the part of this that bothers me so much is the people who sort of are so quick, and it's not just with policing, it's with like every level of society, history, politics, everything, are just so quick to sort of, cry racism. And
Well,
with
for a lot
police,
of them, that's their life, Nick. I mean, that's where they've staked out their territory.
right.
And it's not just the people who scream racism is everything; it's those who scream other things. But yeah, that's their bailiwick.
And I think that it definitely exists. I think you're 100% right, Gerard. I just don't think it's the whole problem. I think there is a deeper, if we're going to evaluate the problems in policing, I don't think that they're new. Police are probably better than they've ever been, just because there's more transparency. But I think that if we just reduce everything to this, this one thing, then we miss other stuff. And the culture of policing, the aggressiveness that we see when, in situations like this, the practices that we're not, privy to, stuff like that. I mean, I just don't, they're not all motivated by race. They're separate from it, right? And if you're evaluating a problem purely based on this one thing, you're bound to just find yourself, in a different place. You're not working towards a solution. You're working towards a political narrative.
Well,
And
I hear you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, go. I'm done.
I hear you. And like I said, I agree with you at the extent that it gets yelled on this. But what's worse? Like overstating racism or completely discounting its effect on.
But I get what you're saying, but but I'm not comparing them. I'm not saying we have to have one or the other. I'm saying that they can both be bad, right? Just because, so one of the problems I have with racism is the perfect example of this, is that extremism, just as in general, comes out of morality, right? People believe that they have, they're morally correct, right? And obviously racism is an inherent evil, but it can also be utilized in a way that creates the anti-racism narrative can be.
Anything
right?
can.
Right.
We see it all the time. We see it with all the culture wars and everything. Anything can be turned into a spear. And
that's what I'm concerned with. And so I agree with you that overstating racism or being overreactive by itself, isn't that big of a deal. But it becomes a big deal when it starts to divide society across racial lines, or in this case, ideological lines. And if you're not agreeing with a specific, mantra, right, then all of a sudden you're a racist, or you're evil too. And that is the problem, because what happens, that creates a level of extremism and divisiveness and toxicity that if it continues, can be as bad or as toxic to society.
Yeah, I think the honest arguments, because there's always going to be different perspectives. So I think honesty in arguments is more important than the perspective of the arguments. And that's where I think it falls apart, is people start making dishonest arguments about it. And that's what causes the
bad faith. Right.
we get, three middle-aged white guys here talking about racism, so it's the perfect demographic. I mean, come on.
All right. So, what did do you guys know who Ronna McDaniel? I know you do, Chuck. Do you know who Ronna McDaniels is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. She used to be a Romney until she decided not to identify that way anymore.
No longer self-identifies as a Romney.
Right.
I like that.
She identifies as a McDaniels, but she won the RNC chairperson today. Big day for the RNC. Mike Lindell got the pillow guy. He's the pillow salesman. He got 4 votes out of like hundreds. So it was pretty funny. But yeah, there was a big push online for McDaniels to be ousted by some, loud voices on the right who didn't think she was aggressive enough. I mean, I don't understand where that comes from.
That's a whole Trumpian thing there. I mean, the fact that there are legitimate people out there who see Mike Lindell as someone that we should listen to is wow. You want to talk about turning off? Yeah, that's another, again, free speech is the greatest thing in the world.
Isn't there like a whole part of the Republican Party that is just cartoonish at this point?
Oh my God, yes, Nick.
So absurdly dumb that it's just like, what?
You cannot parody. Yeah, they're to the extreme where you cannot parody. I mean, there is no shame. Now, there's a component of the left that's like that, but boy, yeah, there's an equal part on the right that is just beyond parody.
That part of the right is like really big. Like it's
way too big.
Primary component, and there is that on the left, but I feel like it's more like you can kind of reduce that to like 5 or 10 representatives.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. It's more than 5 or 10 Republicans. I live in a district with one of the maggots. I mean, God knows. I mean, and he ousted a honest to God libertarian, which pissed me off to no end. I mean, the only real libertarian in Congress, he primaried. 5th District, Virginia is larger than New Jersey. It's very sparsely populated. That's where I live, and yeah, we've got a full-on Liberty University Jesus freak Trumper as our yeah.
It just sucks because I really do believe that there is a part of conservatism and libertarianism that plays a key role in America, and the major party that represents those two ideologies has been reduced to populist nationalism or something, right? Some ridiculousness that it's just so anti-intellectual and stupid, and it's so blatantly that way that I just
and proudly that way, Nick. That's the problem.
Proudly that way.
Yeah.
Like the biggest names right now, like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I just don't get it, right? Anyway,
again, there's for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I understand that for every Gates and MTG, there's Sheila Jackson Lee or Hank Johnson or AOC or whatever. I get that, but man, the crazies on the right nominate presidential candidates. They're not just a little fringe force that you have to pay lip service to. They are kingmakers.
Do they have? Is there? So the difference here, and I'm sorry, Gerard, I know you get something to say, but the difference here is that I see, and this you could argue two different things. Like it might be more dangerous, but the Cori Bushes and the AOCs and the whatever their other names are, right? They have an ideological. They're very ideological, right? The MAGA people just seem like blatant opportunists that use whatever means necessary. They'll change their entire philosophy in 15 seconds if it gets them to wherever they need to go. It's very Trumpian in that way because he didn't really have an ideology. He was just like, whatever, I'll say whatever in this moment to get what I need. That's Trump, right? So it's almost like they've taken a piece of that. And so I don't know where I'm going with it, but it's a distinction there. And that's what makes it so cartoonish. Like, what exactly is your policy, right? What is your agenda?
Yeah.
You except for you hate Democrats and that's it.
Yeah, hate woke, hate Democrats, which I mean, again, eh, I don't know, Dick. You can't parody that which is already a self-parody. I mean, and it's um, I it really struck me in 2016 when Trump got the nomination, first off. Um, I had gone through 8 years of people who were fans of President Obama offering instant grace, equivocation, and explanation for everything he did that I disagreed with. Then the same people, or the whole other set of people, started doing the same thing for Trump. They were behaving exactly like the Obama fanboys and fangirls, except Trump was the object of their worship. And it was no different. And it was actually a little worse, quite frankly. And I tried to point out to so many of them, some I used to call friends, don't you see you're doing the exact same thing that you excoriated him for doing the last 8 years? You're doing the exact same thing. And they couldn't see. They refused to. This time it's different. Not really. I mean, you're doing the exact same thing: instant grace, instant equivocation, instant mitigation of anything that, and of course, Trump was a gold mine for saying stupid things that you had to explain if you supported him. And boy, the same people who defended Obama's, if you like your health care plan, you can keep your health. I mean, there were people who jealously defended that obvious lie. Well, now these same people who were up in arms about that are defending obvious lies from Trump. A lie is a lie. And wow, it really alienated me from a lot of people who did not like the mirror that I showed them.
So to go back a while, I think party chair has got to be the shittiest job in politics. I don't know why people would want that job. It's terrible. I remember the Democrats had one, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, something like that. She was down in Florida, and she was just couldn't do anything right. Inside that party, that was during the the Bernie years and everything. So couldn't do anything right. Ronna McDaniel, why would you? I can't imagine wanting to be the party chair for the Republican Party right now, because it is so full of these wackadoodles who are willing to sit there and fight. And look, the way opportunist was a good word to use for a lot of these Trump supporters in politics already. I mean, your Lindsey Graham's, he warmed right up to him after talking shit about him, and then flushed the toilet as soon as he was gone. There's some people who've kept their wagon hitched to the Trump train, but we watched a lot of them who, were his best buddy, or I didn't even read that tweet that he did. And then when he's gone, write a book or do something like that.
That was the first thing they would say, Jared, is that they would, I didn't see that. And then when you show it to them, oh, well, here's what he meant.
Yeah, just make an excuse for the guy over and over. But you know what? When people talk about Trumpism, it's not an ideology, it's a standard of behavior. And that's what he has brought into politics. He allowed for the lower standard of behavior. And just the way, you talk about the people who blindly followed him. We talk about the lies Obama told, the lies Trump told, every president, they go in there. A lot of the lies, I think, stand around. This is what I want to have happen. This is what I'm going to try to make happen. They say, I'm going to do it. Ends up not happening. The other side just goes in and says,
Bush.
You're a liar. Trump lied about everything. He lied about everything. And he lied in ways that were considerably more, the word is escaping me right now, not just simpler, but darker. He told lies that were lies about worse things than other presidents have done in the past. And I don't see people driving around with Biden flags. I never saw people wearing shirts that said, fuck Trump. I don't remember any sort of like saying that sounded like fuck Trump that became the battle cry for anything. But the way that people love Trump, and we can sit there and say, the NASCAR crowd, but it's not just that. It's politicians.
No, it's deeper than that.
We're getting into power and doing that thing. Have jumped onto that Trumpist standard of behavior, and that's what we're still seeing now. When you see Marjorie Taylor Greene out there, putting in legislation to impeach Biden, and some other ones, the Strategic Oil Reserves that got 14 votes. These aren't serious people.
Yeah.
They're not serious people, and there's always going to be some personalities that are in Congress, in the government, who are not serious people. But I do think that at one point in time, it was a lot of people who had a certain vision for the country, and that's what they were going into politics to try to achieve, was what they saw as the vision for the country. And now I don't think that's the case. Now I think it's a lot of people who it's a personality a personality cult, a chase for power, just putting integrity aside to put the people into positions of power that they think should be there, not because of their vision of America, but because of their ideology.
The dangerous thing is, and I've mentioned this before, I'll be brief because we've probably gone too long here, but the frustrating thing for me is I think, at least, I know how MAGA was created. I know what went into it. I saw the sausage being made, so to speak. 20, 30 years of a certain demographic, you could call them white guys if you want to, whatever. But there was a demographic that felt, for better or correctly or incorrectly, that the institutions that formed the basis of American society were dismissive of them, that they were being told that despite the fact that they're getting up every day trying to do the right thing, trying to do their job, trying to pay their taxes, that all the problems in the world were because of them and their forefathers. And people got fed up with that. It wears on you when you're told repeatedly that all these wrong things are because of you and people who look like you. They found this frustration pooled and found their champion in Trump. And I did not get caught into that at all, but I saw how the sausage was made. And
so the description you're making there is the same description as people who join gangs and people who join skinheads.
Sure.
I think that,
except this time it's just insurance of pure size. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, the mindset is the same. When you feel like everyone else is against you and you found a couple of guys, a few more guys that feel the same way. Yeah, it's just on a much larger scale.
Well, I think they also got caught in a media environment when, godly, this is going back to Roger Stone, Murdoch, all those guys in the late 80s, creating a media 360-degree media bubble to have that. I mean, if you've got people, conservatives have dominated talk radio since the 80s. Absolutely, just thoroughly dominated it. And I think there's a lot of population who were also being told, you're getting blamed for a lot of these things. A lot of population being told, these bad things are happening. Maybe you're not seeing it, but trust us, it's happening. Right. There's people right now who would be afraid to go to Chicago or New York City based upon the things that people who aren't from there are saying.
And if you're in the touristy spots, you're okay. I mean, yeah, you're fine. In both
even Detroit, the touristy spots are.
Oh, I've been to Detroit. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I'm a Tigers fan. Yeah, that's beautiful downtown. But yeah, and again, whether they are correct, incorrect, the truth's probably somewhere in the middle. But that sort of collective dismissal of people, and again, just the constant hammering that this is the reason why things are because you won't give us this or that. I mean, that's not good. I mean, and we found the fruits of that, unfortunately, with Trump. Again, that anger, angst, whatever you want to call it, pooled and coalesced and found its champion. And I just hope we don't go through that again.
Their culture is being attacked, right? There's a cultural anxiety there.
There is, yeah, exactly. And I mean, just some of the people who dismiss it as, oh, you white guys are worried about not being the majority anymore. There's a little bit of truth to that. I mean, everyone is wary of change. Whether even if it's good change, you're still walking on eggshells for a while. But it goes much deeper than that. To me, it is just about the cumulative effect. I mean, for years, I mean, I'll just come out and say it. White people are the only ones you could legally discriminate against in the federal government, and that's through affirmative action. Now, affirmative action is a very laudable program. The goals are laudable. But it is race-based preference is racism by definition. And as a result of that, you can legally discriminate against whites and Asians. and it's, courts have upheld it. And so, and I'm not saying that, that's an evil thing in this regard. It's a laudable goal, but bottom line is you can legally discriminate against certain people for the color of their skin. And that's not good. I mean, it's not good to discriminate against Black people. It's not good to discriminate against white people. I mean, period. I don't see why that's controversial. I mean, that should be universal. But we've made some of it okay, or at least, with a wink and a nod. And it produces Trumps. It produces bad people. And it's avoidable, quite frankly.
I kind of think affirmative action is kind of a drop in the bucket when it comes to everything else that is going on. And the truth is, it's not just white people who you can legally discriminate from the government. We talked earlier about how if you're Black, you're 3 times more likely to be pulled over. You're more likely to be stopped.
That's not official policy, though. I'm talking about in terms of,
So it's not black and white.
Right,
Policy,
but it's
but
wrong.
it is policy that is justified policy. I'll also say anti-trans laws. That's a population of people right there who are being discriminated against right now, right in front of our eyes as we're going on and doing those things. And I get it. I get it when, if you're working class or lower class white, and you think that people are treating your struggles with less seriousness than the struggles of other people based upon their race. I get that. I absolutely get that.
And if you're being, while all this is happening, you're being told how privileged you are, and why you're a bad person for not acknowledging that privilege. It wears on you. It really.
Yeah, but again, I think that started around 2010. I mean, that
predates the Trump presidency. I mean, but
I started hearing around 2010, the whole white privilege thing. And again, that was coming from the left, where they went from the far left and they did it. You use it, white privilege is a strong sounding term, right? Yeah. It sounds so big and such a hammer. And some white person who's struggling you can definitely see how that could get to somebody. Yeah. But at the same time, I think we are giving an awful lot of allowance to a population of people who are feeling that way and feel, the government can discriminate against me because I'm white, compared to the other people in other buckets, in other segments of society who actually do have it worse for reasons that are outside of their.
Can I just say something, though, about the whole white privilege thing? This is another one of my pet peeves, because white privilege has been taken from, I mean, it's sort of a statistical point, right? It's saying that white people are statistically more likely to go to college, statistically more likely to have higher income, statistically, I mean, it's sort of, I understand that maybe there's another definition, but it sort of comes down to this sort of statistical thing, right? And fine, in an academic, intellectual, good faith discussion, we can have that. But that's not what happens.
I agree. It got the term got bastardized by both sides.
Hijacked the term, and now they shove it at people. So,
I don't think just the left hijacked it. I think the right also hijacked the term.
Fair enough.
And I think that goes back into, it's not the perspective, it's the honesty of the
But
audience.
if you're having, so if you're a culturally anxious person, a white person who feels like whatever, right? And you go to have this conversation to express yourself the way you feel from your perspective, and people, especially other white people, right? I'm not even talking about people who actually come from those disadvantaged communities. Yeah. I'm talking about people who are equally as privileged as you, are telling you that your white privilege is speaking, right? You're not even, it's sort of like a fallacious argument that's inserted into political discussions, and it's weaponized, and there is a racial component to it, and it's attacking you based on the color of your skin. So I get what you're saying. Like, look, in the grand scheme of things and all of the pain and suffering that racism's caused, this is what white people are upset about, a term that is being used to describe their whatever entitlement. I get that part. But from the perspective of a whole society of people who already feel like, things are sort of coming down on their head, and you're shoving it in their face repeatedly, I mean, it's counterproductive.
So if you turn that on its head, what you're doing is you're justifying the less virtuous, the more riotous actions during the Black Lives Matter demonstrations that happened in 2020. Because that's the same thing. You've been getting the shit end of it. You've been hearing the shit end of it for a while. So I can understand why you get cranky and start, doing things that you shouldn't be doing and thinking things that you shouldn't be doing. I think we shouldn't accept any of those.
No,
those
I agree.
arguments.
I don't think it's right to be crazy because somebody said you're white privilege.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm trying to say is that it's an unhelpful term that is just completely misused in whatever discussions, and it's not getting us anywhere, right? It's not furthering the conversation. You're not gonna get anywhere in terms of communication with somebody if they feel like you're insulting them.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
Totally
And
agree.
so-
Just like defund the cops.
Right.
A lot of those, the left does it, the right does it, calling people pedophiles and groomers and everything. I hate it because it's dishonest dialogue, and those are the things that you're right.
And
does
that's-
separate it. And when people try to have honest conversations, try to pull it back in, it's hard because the cacophony behind it is just the less integrity driven arguments, or the bigger hammer arguments that
and the
aren't
way
going to get you anywhere.
And the way it works itself out online is you get like this dogpiling of people who are kind of coming at you from every direction. And it really does. I mean, I can see from a personal psychological perspective, if I'm a person online and I, whatever it is, and all these people are coming after me because I have this, what I feel like is a pretty innocuous belief, whatever it is, right? And saying all these bad things to me, it feels like an attack. And it's just, I just feel like, look, racism, institutional racism, systemic racism, white privilege, whatever it is, we can like have these conversations in a sort of a civilized way without, honestly, I'm so busy all the time trying to sort of knock down these fallacious arguments. I don't even think people who I argue with for years know what my perspective is on certain issues because I'm so busy trying to moderate the conversation, right, away from this insanity. And all that does is sort of, it really does kind of, it makes it impossible to be productive. And that's my whole problem, is that we're just in a society where everybody's just so radicalized in terms of their terminology and how they approach situations and debate and all that. So
we've dumbed down debate. Now it's not about how can I make my point the best. It's about how can I knock yours down the most effectively.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it sucks. Anyway, my wife is going to kick my ass.
That should be true on any time, at any time, on
Yeah.
any.
That's an evergreen statement right there, buddy.
I'm on your wife's side on this one.
Ashley, go get him.
Well, I really appreciate you guys coming. I do enjoy these discussions. I wish I could have them more. Fortunately, I'm an adult and I have other responsibilities and activities that I have to engage in, but I appreciate you guys coming, and it was a great talk.
Appreciate it, Nick. Take
Yeah.
care, John.
I hate both of you.
That's where the send
Again,
it, huh?
evergreen.
I just didn't want to end it too positively. Come on.
All right. You guys suck.
That's better. That's better.
Later, guys.
Bye.